Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Everyone at Krellistek knew Victor Langford. For 15 years, he had ruled the company like a lord over his fiefdom, imposing his rules with a mixture of icy intelligence and brutal authority. Tall, elegant, with a piercing gaze, always dressed to the nines in his Italian suits, he commanded silence as soon as he entered a room. Even his silences carried heavy consequences. A poorly worded remark or an expressed doubt could be enough to bury a career. In the motto, you don't build a business with feelings, but with decisions. And no one dared to question it. Under his leadership, Krellistek had experienced meteoric growth. The company had risen to the top of the embedded AI technology sector, collaborating with automotive and defense giants. Shareholders were delighted. The quarterly figures were dizzying, and the financial media were dubbing it the Silicon Prairie strategist. But behind these trophies on display, the company's interior was cracking. The turnover employee harassment reached new heights, particularly among young talent from minorities or women in leadership positions. Promotions were delayed without explanation, meetings where women's voices were systematically interrupted, looks exchanged when a female engineer dared to contradict a director. Sexism was never spoken of, but always felt. Racism, however, took more insidious forms: innocent comments, doubts about the competence of certain profiles, and a flagrant lack of diversity at the top of the pyramid. Victor saw none of this. Worse, he didn't care. In his eyes, only performance mattered. If you are good, you will be seen. Period. A phrase he often repeated in council meetings, forgetting that he himself had been supported, as a young man, by a network of wealthy white university friends. The hierarchy at Krellistek was as rigid as a military organizational chart. No innovation could be proposed without going through 3 levels of approval. The fear of failure paralyzed creativity. Executives no longer took initiative. The company operated like a machine, efficient but soulless. But what Victor didn't know was that Onyx Holdings, the multinational group that owned Krellistek, had changed its philosophy. For 2 years, Onyx's board of directors, tired of internal scandals in several of its subsidiaries, had begun a silent restructuring, auditing HR practices, studying corporate culture, and above all, gradually replacing the most rigid managers. Their goal was no longer just immediate profit, but sustainability, ethical, human, social. And at the heart of this new strategy was a name, still unknown to Victor: Amaya Williams. A brilliant director and discreet strategist, she had proven herself by turning around 3 companies in crisis in less than 5 years, while establishing respectful and inclusive work environments. Harvard, MIT, then the field. She didn't have the resume of someone you immediately notice. But every company she touched was reborn with new energy. She was not only competent, she embodied change. And now his gaze was turned towards Krellistek, not for observing from afar, not to suggest reforms, but for take orders. The Monday morning, under a gray autumn sky, Amaya Williams pushed open the heavy glass door of the main building Krellistek. The building, made of brushed steel and smoked glass, dominated the avenue like a bastion of modern power. Everything about this architecture exuded rigor and control: the cold lines, the white lighting, the electronic badges on each employee's wrist. A sanitized, silent, almost military atmosphere. Amaya walked with a sure but discreet step, dressed in a sober beige suit, her braided hair neatly pulled back into a bun. She carried a small rolling suitcase and a slim brown leather satchel. No ostentatious jewelry, no garish makeup. Nothing distinguished her from an ordinary office worker. And that was exactly the point. No one was supposed to know that she was actually the new executive director, appointed 3 days earlier by the board of directors of Onyx Holdings. She hadn't insisted to not enter through the front door or give instructions from a distance. She wanted to see with one's own eyes, feel the culture from the inside, and above all understand how those who did not have pompous titles were treated. This was not just a whim of the leader, it was a strategy, an immersion, a test, and, for those who would judge her on her appearance, a silent warning. She had barely crossed the main hall when a dry voice cut her off. "Are you looking for something?" Amaya looked up. Victor Langford stood there with his arms crossed, his gaze as sharp as a blade. He had spotted her from afar. He always did that with newcomers. He didn't like what he couldn't control. "I'm Amaya," she said calmly, the new assistant, assigned to the executive department. He looked her over without answering immediately. His eyes scanned her suit, her shoes, her features, her hands. Then he sketched a cold smile. "HR is really doing anything. An assistant? No one consulted me." He didn't take out his phone, didn't check his calendar, didn't ask for any documents. He had already decided. "I don't need an assistant. And certainly not today. Go see HR. Tell them we're not keeping you on." He turned on his heel without waiting for an answer, as if he had just thrown an unimportant file in the trash. A heavy silence followed his departure. Amaya didn't move immediately. She took a deep breath, unblinking, then cracked a thin smile. Not out of defiance, but out of lucidity. She had just witnessed, in less than 2 minutes, living proof of the problem she had come to solve. Barely on a minute later, the metallic clang of the elevator echoed through the glass-enclosed lobby of Krellistek. The doors slid open slowly, almost solemnly, revealing 3 figures that no one was waiting. In the lead, Martin Briggs, vice chairman of the board of directors of Onyx Holdings. Tall, silver hair, closed expression. He held a black leather folder under his arm, a symbol of decisions that leave no room for debate. To his right, Laura Sterling, legal director of Onyx. Always impeccably dressed, she observed the scene with surgical calm. Her gaze moved from badge to badge, from posture to posture, as if she were taking in every detail of the scene. Behind them walked Michael Torres, CEO of Onyx Holdings, an industry legend. The son of immigrants, a self-made man with a piercing gaze, known for his humane view of power and his ability to make decisions without trembling. His mere presence in that lobby sent shivers down the spines of even the most veteran employees. Victor Langford, who was about to enter the elevator, stopped dead in his tracks. His body stiffened imperceptibly. He squared his shoulders and tried to regain the mask he wore so well, that of the man in control. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said with a polite smile, "I didn't know you were stopping by today. What an honor." Michael Torres didn't answer right away. He stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back, staring at Victor like a doctor observing a patient whose prognosis is known in advance. "Victor," he said finally, "we are not here for a courtesy visit. We have come to announce a decision of the council." Victor narrowed his eyes defensively. "I'm listening to you." Onyx Holdings has appointed a new executive director for Krellistek. She takes up her duties immediately. She will now supervise all internal decisions of the company. A tense silence fell. The few employees in the lobby pretended not to listen, but their ears burned. Victor raised his voice slightly, betraying his annoyance. "What? Without telling me? You didn't even consult me. That's a mistake." Michael Torres tilted his head slightly to the side, as if examining a file one last time before closing it forever. "No, Victor. It's Annie." He then stepped back, revealing Amaya's silhouette, who had remained in the background until then. She stepped forward, straight, calm, and confident. Her heels echoed softly on the marble floor, each step charged with meaning. Amaya met Victor's gaze with disarming serenity. "Hello, Victor. I am Amaya Williams. And from today, I am your direct superior." The entire hall froze in shock. Victor didn't answer. He stared at Amaya as if she'd just stepped out of a mirage. Her face went through a gamut of emotions: surprise, denial, suppressed anger, and finally, a deep, almost existential doubt. That moment when you realize that everything we thought we had under control has just been turned upside down. Around them, silence had become almost sacred. Even the coffee machines seemed to have gone silent. Laura Sterling spoke in a neutral voice, breaking the moment. "We'll schedule a meeting with the council at 10 a.m. Please clear your schedule, Victor." But Amaya didn't look away. She knew this moment would be a turning point, not just for her, but for the whole company, and perhaps for Victor Langford himself. The first few weeks were anything but peaceful. Behind the glass doors of the meeting rooms and the strained smiles of the corridors, a silent war had begun. Not a war of shouting or chaos, but of averted glances, lost files, and emails that were forgotten to be answered. Victor Langford did not accept what, in his eyes, was a double offense: being outclassed by a woman, and even worse, a black woman, younger than him, who had not climbed the ladder the old way. He saw Amaya as a threat, a symbol of this new world that he despised without understanding it. Every day he tried to sabotage his authority, subtly but systematically. He criticized his decisions during executive meetings, sowed doubts about his methods among shareholders, and worked in the shadows to manipulate frames loyal to the old hierarchical culture, a culture where blind obedience and silent exclusion were the norm. More Amaya Williams shan't come alone. She wasn't there to play by rules written by others. She had a plan, a vision, but above all, a past forged in adversity. Daughter of a home nurse and a union worker Detroit, Amaya had grown up in a neighborhood where every success was achieved through courage and discipline. Very early on, she understood that the world would not do anything to her no favors. She had won a scholarship to Harvard, then continued to WITH, where she specialized in organizational engineering. But even there, in the prestigious amphitheaters, she had to face the regard's condescendence, to professors who doubted its legitimacy, to working groups that ignored him until his ideas were taken up by others, higher up in the invisible hierarchy. She knew the meetings where the man sitting next to her was addressed, as if she were just the assistant. She knew the promotions that never happened, without explanation. But instead of hardening or bending, she had learned to observe, to listen, and to transform this imposed margin in strategic advantage. She then built, in the shadows, a formidable reputation, that of Arconstructive. She was called upon when a company was in human as well as economic crisis. And each time, she succeeded where others failed, not by imposing fear, but by bringing out collective intelligence. At Krellistek, she applied the same method. Instead of locking herself away in the ivory tower of management, she went down to the upper floors. She organized open meetings with all employees, without imposed hierarchy. She spent entire afternoons with the maintenance technicians, listening to their ideas and complaints. She shared lunches with the junior engineers, those who were barely called by their first name. She visited the open space of the interns and asked everyone, "What would you change here if you had the power?" And she listened. Really. Then she through AHE completes the audit internal line promotions, salary gaps, internal complaint procedures. She set up anonymous platform to report abuse. She published transparent reports on team diversity, raises, and even internal satisfaction votes. She refused flattery, valued teamwork, and imposed a new rule. Here, competence doesn't wear a costume. It's proven every day. At first, some snickered. But as the weeks went by, something changed. Of the previously invisible faces spoke. Of the stifled talents regained confidence. Of the close-knit teams emerged where there were only silos. And soon, the results followed. Increasing productivity, better staff retention, new innovations filed, and renewed contracts with key partners. During this time, Victor sank into his office. His support was becoming rarer. Some executives he believed to be loyal were now getting closer to Amaya, not out of opportunism, but because they saw in her a leader who listened and acted. Then one day, the final blow. An technical service employee, young, discreet, but brilliant, filed an official complaint for moral harassment and abusive pressure. He had tried to speak to his superiors, without success. It was through the new platform set up by Amaya that he found the courage to reveal everything. Amaya didn't back down. She ordered an independent investigation, with an obligation of transparency. The results came in 2 weeks later. And to everyone's amazement, the evidence traced directly back to Victor Langford himself. Derogatory emails, meeting recordings, cross-examinations, veiled threats. What Victor believed to be normal pressure techniques were now considered systemic abuse, incompatible with the values of the holding company. The mask fell, and with him, the illusion of unassailable power. The 32nd floor meeting room was quieter than ever. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the gray sky seemed suspended, as if holding its breath alongside those around the long mahogany table. The 12 members of Onyx Holdings' board of directors were there, their faces closed, their files open before them. To their right, Amaya Williams, straight, serene, surrounded by a few compliance and human resources advisors. To their left, Victor Langford, visibly tense, a drop of sweat beading on his temple despite the air conditioning. The meeting began with the reading of the survey results. Forged internal documents, intimidating emails, consistent testimonies from harassed employees. Excerpts from audio recordings. Victor tries to intervene. These accusations are exaggerated. You know me. I lead firmly. Yes, but never with malice. Demand is confused with oppression. But every attempt at justification fell before the strength of the evidence. Laura Sterling, the legal director, coldly summed up the conclusions. This is not an isolated case, Victor. It is a behavior pattern, repeated, stifled, tolerated. But not anymore. Michael Torres, president of Onyx Holdings, added firmly. The company can no longer carry this burden. Not in this changing world. Not with this team rebuilding. Victor, we await your resignation. Victor, pale, met Amaya's gaze for the first time since the beginning of the session. She was not triumphant. She wasn't jubilant. She was just there, incarnation of this change that he had refused, despised, and which had just overtaken him. He lowered his eyes, slowly signed the presented document. Then he stood up without a word, slipped his things into a bag, and left the room in heavy silence. No one held him back. In the hallway, as he walked past Amaya, she gently stopped him in a clear voice. You sent me away without knowing me. I'm not returning the favor. I'm letting you go with your dignity. She paused. But remember this. The era where power crushed respect is over here. Victor didn't answer. He closed the door on 15 years of arrogance and left behind a company which was no longer his. A year had passed. Krelistech had changed his face. In the corridors, the faces were more diverse, the voices freer. Collaborative projects had emerged from all levels of the company. International partnerships had been signed with ethical startups. The company had set up a scholarship fund for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds who wanted to enter STEM fields. But above all, the atmosphere had changed. Employees were no longer afraid to ask questions. Meetings started on time and ended with ideas. Real innovation was no longer the privilege of a small circle, but the fruit of a living ecosystem. That year, Krelistech was named among the 10 most ethical companies in the United States, praised for its transparent governance, its policy of inclusion, and its model of transformative leadership. In the media, there was talk of the Amaya effect. But Amaya continued her work in the shadows, refusing the spotlight. She often said, I didn't come to shine. I came to enlighten. And in a discreet corner of the building, on level -1, where a neglected warehouse once stood, she had artist area for technical staff, with comfortable armchairs, library, cafe, and silence. At the entrance, a discreet plaque, screwed to the white wall, bore this simple inscription. Where listening begins, innovation is born. Thank you, Amaya.